The shattered window. The pane fractured in a starburst pattern, the sharp report echoing in Olivia's sunlit living room. A baseball, still wobbling from the impact, rested amidst the glittering debris on her rug, its stitched leather bearing silent witness to the havoc. Olivia froze, her pulse quickening. More than just the shattered glass, it was the intrusion that stung. Her cherished retreat, a sanctuary of books and canvases, now gaped open, defenseless. The afternoon light, once a soothing embrace, now poured in with harsh clarity, spotlighting the chaos and her disquiet. Gingerly, she picked up a shard. Its edge was keen, unforgiving. A bead of crimson welled on her fingertip. She brought it to her lips, the metallic tang mingling with the ghost of strawberry jam. The young ballplayers from down the street, notorious for their spirited games in the empty lot, had vanished. No shouted apology, only the sudden, violent percussion. A wave of irritation surged through her. It wasn't solely the expense of replacement, though that was a factor. It was the disruption, the sense of unease. She felt exposed, like an actor abruptly shoved onto a stage without lines. Rising, she brushed slivers from her jeans. A breeze, carrying the aroma of mown grass and distant grilling, whispered through the ragged opening. Autumn approached, promising colder nights. A figure darkened the doorway. "Olivia? You all right?" I heard a crash. It was Dave, her neighbor. He stood there, silhouetted against the fading light, concern etched on his face. He wore his typical weekend uniform, a well-worn blue tee and comfortable khakis. A reassuring steadiness emanated from him, a quiet confidence. "Dave," she managed, her voice wavering. "It's just the window. A stray ball." She indicated the scene, with a helpless gesture. He entered, his gaze taking in the extent of the damage. "Those kids," he grumbled, shaking his head. "They need to learn some consideration." "You okay? Any cuts?" "Just a prick," she replied, displaying her finger. "But the window?" "I'm at a loss." Dave surveyed the situation, lines forming around his eyes. "Here's what we'll do," he said, his tone warm and practical. "I've got some plywood in the garage. We can secure it for tonight, at least. Keep the chill out. And I know a glass guy. Straight shooter. I'll give him a shout tomorrow." Relief washed over Olivia, a soothing balm for her jangled nerves. "Oh, Dave, would you? I'd be so grateful. I don't know what I'd have done." He smiled, a genuine, eye-crinkling smile. "Nonsense. That's what neighbors are for. Let me grab the plywood. You find some gloves, stay safe. This is going to take a bit, but we'll manage. We'll get it fixed." As Dave turned away, Olivia experienced a rush of thankfulness. It wasn't just the tangible assistance he offered, it was the simple act of caring, of being present. Suddenly, the broken window appeared less daunting, the vulnerability less acute. Neighborly assistance. Dave circled the shattered window, his brow furrowed in concentration. Tiny shards of glass crunched under his work boots as he knelt, examining the frame. "Nasty break," he murmured, more to himself than Olivia. "Looks like more than just a rock, maybe a branch in the wind." Olivia shrugged, feeling a strange mix of relief and embarrassment as she watched him. Relief that someone competent was finally taking charge, and embarrassment that she'd let it get this far in the first place. Could be. "We had a pretty rough storm last week. I mostly stayed inside, working." He stood, brushing off his jeans. "Well, we'll get it sorted. I've got some spare glass in the garage. Not quite a perfect match, but it'll keep the weather out until you can get a proper replacement." He glanced at the overgrown flower beds that lined the porch. "Speaking of weather, your roses look thirsty. We had a dry spell, didn't we?" Olivia winced. Gardening was definitely not her forte. "They are a bit neglected. I'm more of an indoor plant person, I guess. Succulents are my friends." Dave chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. Succulents are good. Low maintenance. These old roses are hardy, though. Just need a good watering and a bit of pruning. Maybe I can give you some tips sometime. My wife, God rest her soul, had a real green thumb. A shadow flickered across his face, gone so quickly Olivia almost missed it. I'd like that, she said softly, surprised by how much she meant it. I've been meaning to learn more about gardening. And really, anything that gets me out of the house more. Dave brightened, the shadow banished. Well, there's the community garden project down by the river. They're always looking for volunteers. Good way to meet people too. He pulled a retractable measuring tape from his tool belt. Right, let's get some measurements. The air thickened subtly as he moved closer, the scent of sawdust and something faintly citrusy clinging to him. Olivia found herself unnecessarily smoothing her hair as he called out numbers and jotted them down on a notepad. His arm brushed hers as he reached across her to measure the height of the window frame. A jolt, like static electricity, shot through her. Just about 2 feet by 3 feet, he announced, stepping back. I should have a piece that'll fit. Give me an hour or so to cut it to size. You want to clear away any loose glass in the meantime. Gloves and a trash bag should do the trick. Sure, I can do that. Olivia busied herself gathering the necessary supplies, grateful for the task. The sooner the window was fixed, the sooner this heightened awareness would fade. Or so she hoped. Lingering touches. Just a hair more to the left, Olivia directed, squinting at the metal measuring tape Dave held against the upper corner of the window frame. The cool morning air, thick with the scent of damp earth and budding jasmine from her garden, swirled around them. Dave shifted, his arm brushing against hers. A jolt, unexpected and unfamiliar, shot through Olivia. She inhaled sharply, trying to ignore the sudden acceleration of her pulse. Got it, Dave murmured, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the small space. He marked the spot with a stubby pencil he'd pulled from his pocket. He wore a faded blue work shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms tanned and crisscrossed with fine lines. Olivia found herself noticing the details with an intensity that surprised her. Okay, she said, stepping back. Let's try the bottom. Dave crouched, the measuring tape extending across the width of the frame. Olivia leaned in to read the numbers, her shoulder almost touching his. The scent of his aftershave, a clean, woodsy fragrance, filled her nostrils. He smelled like sunshine and freshly cut lumber, a potent combination that made her head swim. Dave said, his brow furrowed. It's a fraction wider here. Almost imperceptible but enough to throw off the fit. He reached out, his fingers lightly grazing her hand as he adjusted the tape. A spark ignited where their skin met, a small, electric shock that lingered even after he moved away. Olivia's breath hitched. It had to be accidental, a simple, innocent touch. But the lingering heat in her palm told a different story. He straightened, his eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink, the sounds of the neighborhood fading into a distant hum. There was a question in his gaze, a hesitant vulnerability that mirrored her own. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the frantic beating of Olivia's heart. Dave cleared his throat, breaking the spell. So, he said, his voice a little rough. Looks like we need to be precise with the measurements. I'll go grab my level. Be right back. He turned and walked quickly toward his truck, leaving Olivia standing alone in the morning light, the lingering touch on her hand burning like an ember. The hardware run. The cab of Dave's truck smelled faintly of sawdust and something indefinably masculine, a mix of old leather and sunshine. Olivia settled onto the worn bench seat, the springs groaning beneath her. Dave adjusted the rearview mirror, his brow furrowed in concentration. All right, let's get this show on the road. Hardware store, here we come. The engine rumbled to life, a comforting, familiar sound. As they pulled away from the curb, Olivia glanced at Dave. He seemed at ease, his hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. Strong hands, she noticed, calloused but gentle. Hands that had probably built countless things, fixed countless problems. She quickly averted her gaze, focusing on the passing houses. "So," Dave said, breaking the silence, "that window, what kind of glass was it?" "Just regular pane." Olivia hesitated. I'm not sure. It felt thicker than normal. Maybe double-paned. It seemed to have some kind of film on it too." Dave nodded slowly. "Could be. We'll take a look at the options. Don't want to end up with something that doesn't fit right." He turned onto Main Street, the truck jostling slightly over a pothole. The radio crackled to life, playing a classic country song. Dave didn't seem to notice, his attention fixed on the road. The hardware store loomed ahead, a sprawling, unglamorous building. As Dave maneuvered the truck into a parking space, Olivia found herself studying him again. The way the sunlight caught the silver in his hair, the lines etched around his eyes that spoke of a life well lived. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of competence that was undeniably attractive. "All right," Dave said, cutting off her thoughts, "let's go find some glass." He hopped out of the truck, his movements surprisingly agile for a man his age. Olivia followed, the gravel crunching beneath her feet. Inside the store, the air was thick with the scent of paint and metal. Dave led the way through the aisles, his hand resting lightly on her back as he guided her past stacks of lumber and shelves of tools. The casual touch sent a shiver down her spine. "Here we are," Dave announced, stopping in front of a display of glass panes. He picked up a sample, examining it closely. "This looks like a good match. Tempered glass, sturdy stuff." Olivia reached out, touching the smooth surface. It felt cool and solid beneath her fingertips. "It does feel right," she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. Dave looked at her, his eyes searching hers. "Good. Then let's get it cut." The air crackled with an unspoken tension, a silent acknowledgement of the attraction that simmered between them. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. This simple trip to the hardware store felt like anything but simple. Setting sun, long shadows. The truck rumbled to a stop in Olivia's driveway, spitting dust as Dave cut the engine. He hopped out, grabbing the lumber from the back with practiced ease. Olivia, clipboard clutched in her hand, followed him, her eyes adjusting to the sudden shift from the bright afternoon sun to the shade of the porch. "I still feel bad about making you drive all the way out to Miller's Hardware," she said, feeling a familiar blush creep up her neck. Dave chuckled, the sound warm and comforting. "Don't be silly. Anything for a damsel in distress." He winked, and Olivia's heart fluttered unexpectedly. He turned toward the damaged window, his brow furrowed in concentration. "All right, let's get this show on the road." The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of apricot and rose. The light streamed through the gaps in the old oak tree in her front yard, casting long, dancing shadows across the lawn and up the side of the house. The air, thick with the scent of pine from the lumber and the sweet perfume of honeysuckle climbing the porch railing, felt heavy, almost expectant. Dave worked with a quiet efficiency, measuring, sawing, and fitting the new frame with a deftness that surprised Olivia. She'd always pictured him as a retired accountant, not a craftsman. Each swing of the hammer, each precise cut, only heightened her awareness of his presence. The rhythmic sounds echoed in the stillness, punctuated only by the occasional chirp of a cricket hidden in the overgrown flower bed. He paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a smudge of sawdust on his skin. "Mind handing me that level, Olivia?" She reached for the tool, their fingers brushing as she passed it to him. A jolt, subtle but undeniable, shot up her arm. She quickly retracted her hand, her cheeks burning. He didn't seem to notice, his focus entirely on the task at hand. "Thanks," he mumbled, his voice slightly muffled as he leaned into the window frame. Olivia busied herself with tidying up the scattered tools, avoiding his gaze. The shadows had lengthened, stretching across the yard like long fingers, engulfing everything in their dusky embrace. Inside the house, the light was fading, casting the familiar rooms in an unfamiliar, almost dreamlike glow. She felt a strange sense of disorientation, as if she were standing on the precipice of something unknown. Dave stepped back, surveying his work. "Almost there," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. He turned to face her, and the setting sun caught the lines etched around his eyes, making them crinkle at the corners. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. He looked different. Not just tired but somehow vulnerable. The warmth in his gaze seemed to intensify, burning through her carefully constructed defenses. "Olivia," he said softly, his voice a low rumble that resonated within her. "Is everything all right?" She swallowed hard, struggling to find her voice. The unspoken words hung in the air between them, thick and heavy like the scent of honeysuckle. Accidental contact. Olivia needed the hammer. Sunlight streamed through the newly installed pane, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. Dave had gone inside to fetch something, leaving her perched precariously on the ladder, the last molding strip refusing to cooperate. She leaned, stretching her arm towards the toolbox resting on the dusty porch railing. It was just out of reach. "Damn," she muttered, shifting her weight. The ladder wobbled, a metallic groan echoing in the sudden quiet. "Need something?" Dave's voice startled her. He was closer than she'd realized, materializing from the shadows of the porch, a roll of weather stripping in his hand. "Just the hammer," she said, pointing towards the toolbox. He nodded, placing the weather stripping on the porch swing. He squatted, rummaging through the jumble of tools. Olivia watched the play of muscles in his back as he reached deeper into the box. He straightened, the hammer held aloft. "Here you go," he said, extending it towards her. Their hands brushed. A jolt, sharp and unexpected, shot up Olivia's arm. It wasn't painful, more like a spark igniting a long-dormant fuse. Her breath hitched. The rough texture of his calloused palm grazed the sensitive skin of her wrist. It was a fleeting touch, barely there, yet it resonated through her with surprising force. She looked up, her gaze colliding with his. Dave's eyes, usually crinkled in a perpetual smile, were suddenly intense, the blue deepened to a stormy indigo. He didn't release the hammer immediately. His fingers lingered on the handle, his knuckles brushing hers again. A silent question hung in the air between them. Olivia felt her cheeks flush. She swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. The scent of sawdust and something uniquely him, a blend of old spice and fresh air, filled her nostrils, making her head spin. The sunlight seemed to amplify, blurring the edges of his face. Finally, he relinquished the hammer. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice a low rumble. He stepped back, almost awkwardly, running a hand through his thinning hair. "No problem," Olivia managed, her voice a strained whisper. She gripped the hammer tightly, her knuckles white. The metal felt strangely warm against her skin, as if it had absorbed the heat of his touch. She turned back to the molding, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand, but her hands trembled. Each tap of the hammer felt amplified, echoing the frantic rhythm of her heart. She could feel his gaze on her back, a tangible weight. The air crackled with unspoken tension, thick and heavy as summer humidity. Stories and vulnerabilities. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the living room, as Dave finished securing the last pane of glass. "There you go," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Good as new." Olivia stepped back, admiring his work. "It's perfect." "Thank you, Dave, really." "My pleasure," he replied, his gaze lingering on her a moment too long before he looked away. "So, I made some tea earlier. Would you like a cup?" She hesitated, a knot forming in her stomach. She knew accepting meant prolonging this something that was simmering between them. But she couldn't resist. "That sounds lovely." They settled at his kitchen table, the air thick with unspoken words. Dave poured the tea, the clinking of the ceramic mugs the only sound for a moment. "Sarah, my wife, she loved making tea," he said softly, a wistful smile playing on his lips. "She had this whole ritual about it, different blends for different moods." Olivia's heart ached for him. "She sounds wonderful." She was, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Adventurous, too. Always dragging me off on some crazy escapade. He chuckled, a fond memory flickering in his eyes. We climbed Mount Kilimanjaro once. Sarah nearly turned back halfway up, altitude sickness hit her hard. But she was stubborn. Said she wasn't going to let a little mountain beat her. Olivia leaned forward, captivated. Did she make it? Did she ever? He grinned. She stood on that summit, arms raised, yelling at the top of her lungs. It was inspiring. He paused, his gaze drifting off. We took a picture. I still have it somewhere. That sounds incredible, Olivia breathed, picturing it. She suddenly felt a pang of envy, not just for the adventure, but for the deep connection they shared. I've never done anything like that. You should, he said, his eyes meeting hers again. It changes you. Makes you realize what you're capable of. He took a sip of his tea, then set the mug down. Another time, we were backpacking through Southeast Asia, and we got caught in a monsoon in Thailand. We were miles from anywhere, soaked to the bone, and the river we needed to cross had turned into a raging torrent. Sarah just started laughing. Said it was the most alive she'd ever felt. Olivia laughed too, the sound lighter than she'd felt in days. Dave's stories were like a window into a world she hadn't known existed within him. A world of daring and passion, of love and loss. And something else, of vulnerability, that she hadn't expected. I think, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I need to be more adventurous. Dave's gaze intensified. Maybe, he said softly, we could be adventurous together. The rainstorm. Olivia swore under her breath, the word lost to the crisp autumn air. The pain refused to settle. It was off, just a hair, but enough to keep the putty from sealing correctly. Dave adjusted his glasses, peering at the offending corner. Let me try something. He took the pane, turning it a fraction of an inch. Still no luck. Frustration tightened Olivia's shoulders. She'd been so optimistic this morning, envisioning the project complete, sunshine streaming through the newly installed window. Now, the gaping hole in her dining room wall seemed a metaphor for the chaos bubbling beneath the surface of her carefully constructed life. And Dave, so close, his familiar scent of wood shavings and Old Spice strangely comforting, only amplified the feeling. Maybe it's the frame, Dave suggested, running a calloused hand along the aged wood. It could be warped. We might need to, he trailed off, his gaze lifting to the sky. The air had grown heavy, the playful breeze replaced by an unsettling stillness. The leaves on the maple tree in her front yard hung limp. A single drop of rain, fat and cold, splattered on Olivia's cheek. Then another and another, each one a tiny hammer blow against her rising anxiety. Oh great, she muttered. Dave's brow furrowed. We need to get this covered. Before either of them could react, the sky unleashed its fury. A torrent of rain slammed into the yard, turning the grass a slick, emerald green. The wind howled, whipping the leaves into a frenzy. Olivia gasped, grabbing the tarp they'd used to protect the furniture. Dave snatched the remaining putty and nails, shoving them into his pocket. They scrambled towards the house, the rain plastering their hair to their faces and soaking their clothes. Olivia fumbled with the back door, her fingers clumsy and numb. Dave reached past her, his hand brushing against hers, and pushed the door open. They stumbled inside, breathless and dripping, into the relative warmth of the living room. Olivia leaned against the door, her chest heaving, the sound amplified in the sudden quiet after the storm's roar. Rain hammered against the windows, turning the glass opaque. Dave stood a few feet away, water streaming from his hair onto the worn rug. He pushed his glasses up his nose, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. Well, he said, his voice a little hoarse. That escalated quickly. Olivia laughed, a shaky, nervous sound. The air crackled with unspoken tension, thicker now than the humidity. The storm outside had trapped them, not just in her house, but in a moment, suspended between the window, the rain, and the undeniable pull between them. Undeniable electricity. The last pane slotted into place with a satisfying click. Sunlight streamed into Olivia's living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Dave stepped back, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, that should do it." Olivia grinned, relief flooding her. "It looks amazing, Dave." "Thank you." "Really?" He met her gaze, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "My pleasure, Olivia. Glad I could help." A comfortable silence settled between them, the kind that wasn't awkward but pregnant with unspoken words. Olivia found herself studying the lines etched around Dave's eyes, each one telling a story she wanted to hear. He had a quiet strength, a steady presence that calmed the anxieties that often swirled within her. She noticed a stray strand of her hair had escaped her bun, and was clinging to her cheek. Before she could reach for it, Dave gently brushed it away with the back of his hand. The simple gesture sent a jolt through her, a shock of awareness that made her breath catch in her throat. His skin was warm, a little rough, and the contact lingered a fraction longer than necessary. Her eyes locked with his. The comfortable silence shifted, becoming charged, electric. The air in the small room seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. His gaze intensified, reflecting a vulnerability she hadn't seen before, a yearning that mirrored her own. He wasn't just looking at her, he was seeing into her. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that this was a pivotal moment. A choice. He lowered his head slightly, his gaze dropping to her lips, then back to her eyes. A question hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Olivia swallowed, her mouth suddenly dry. She didn't need words. She tilted her head almost imperceptibly, giving him her answer. Dave moved slowly, deliberately, bridging the remaining space between them. His hand cupped her cheek, his thumb gently stroking her skin. Olivia closed her eyes, anticipating the touch she had unknowingly craved since he first walked through her door. His lips met hers, tentatively at first, a feather-light pressure that sent shivers down her spine. Then, with a soft groan, the kiss deepened. It was a hesitant exploration, a question and an answer, a tentative dance of need and vulnerability. Olivia responded instinctively, her arms rising to encircle his neck, pulling him closer. The years of quiet loneliness seemed to melt away as they stood there, bathed in the afternoon sun, lost in the unexpected intensity of their connection. The kiss was a revelation, a promise, a beginning. When they finally broke apart, breathless and flushed, the undeniable electricity still crackled in the air between them. Dave stepped back slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Olivia," he murmured, his voice husky. Olivia didn't speak. Words seemed inadequate, clumsy. She simply looked at him, letting her eyes convey the emotions swirling within her, surprise, desire, and a flicker of fear, quickly overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of hope.